out here. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching this video. I'm recording with my good friend Keith Hessel. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Keith? Awesome.
Just like it looks.
Okay, perfect. I know some people mispronounce my name sometimes. I'm like, it's okay. But yeah, a great, good friend of mine who runs Serve Business Consulting here in Colorado Springs. And yeah, Keith has just a huge heart to add value to companies by helping them grow and create healthy customer service experiences, as well as, investing in your employees. So, Keith, it's great to have you on this recording. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, one of the things that Keith is going to talk to us about today that I'm really excited about is uh, handling difficult customer service conversations. And I know that for some of us as business owners, we and Keith and I were kind of talking about this before we started recording, but a lot of us we start our own businesses because we're really passionate about a product or service that we sell, and that's what we want to do for the rest of our lives is just focus on that. And then we realize, oh wait, we have to deal with customers. And so, sometimes our customers are really great, and sometimes we have really difficult people that we work with. We have different personality types. And, if you're kind of introverted like me, sometimes that can catch us off guard. So, what Keith is going to do is he's got tons of experience in this area, by the way. Keith, before starting his own consulting business, he worked for many very large companies. He developed many of the customer service procedures and manuals for them that they're still using today, and really trained those teams on how to handle customer service. So when it comes to learning how to have healthy, positive customer service conversations, Keith is definitely a trusted voice in that area. So we're gonna we're going to pick his brain on a few things. And he came to the table today with just a lot of great insights. And I'm really excited to see what he, gets to share. I know I'm going to learn a lot. So let's go ahead and dive into this. So, Keith, kind of the first question that I have, and then you can, take the reins on this. But the first question I have is when it comes to a business knowing, okay, we have a pretty escalated customer situation, whether it's, a phone call, email, Google review, and they know, gosh, I gotta go into this. I've got to de-escalate this, or maybe they have a team, maybe they have an employee that they're trying to coach to try to help de-escalate that. But the question I have is, what's the best way for someone to prepare themselves, their team, to have a conversation with a difficult customer to where they're going to feel good about it, and it's going to create overall just some good positive results for their company. So that's the question, and I'll let you kind of respond however you want to on that.
Absolutely. So, yeah, basically, the biggest thing with customer escalations are that you want to have something in place to prevent them
Mhm.
whenever possible. But
Right.
having the mindset of just knowing that they are going to happen. It's inevitable. You are providing a service, you're providing a product, whatever, and there's going to be people who absolutely rave about it. There's going to be people who absolutely love it. There's going to be people who try it out and it's like, yeah, well, yeah, that wasn't really for me, but whatever. And then there's going to be people who you piss off beyond all belief. Um, whether that is because of how you interacted with them or the product wasn't what they were expecting or something like that. It is going to happen. It is inevitable. um,
Mm.
so one of the things that we'll always advocate for is first and foremost knowing your customers. um, what is it that brought them into your business, not what. what are they looking for, not um, you know, are they just browsing? What is it that brought them to your website, to your storefront, to whatever, you know, your shop, whatever the case is. And then that lets you know what they're coming in expecting. You know, what are the expectations that they have coming into you? You know, are they expecting to have a one size fits all product? Are they expecting to have a service that's just going to make, that's going to totally blow their mind? And some of that comes down to advertising, some of it comes down to just their own preconceived notions when they look you up. Um, and then what are your expectations for your own business? You know, you got to know your own business. And a lot of people call that, knowing your why and knowing, what it is that you got into. Um, I've never felt comfortable just having a single why um, that, drives everything. I try to figure out, what's my why for today? Wait, yes, this is what I do, this is what I offer to businesses, but what's my why for offering it today? Um, and so that's kind of that standing expectations there. And then you got to know yourself. You have to know your business inside, outside, up, down, back, forwards. Because there's a surprising number of business owners who are surprised when they actually learn the truth, especially when you're a business owner who's gotten to the point of having a few employees. If you've ever seen Undercover Boss, that has got to be one of the most glorious examples out there of, you can you can feel like you are thoroughly involved in the day-to-day operations, but there's always going to be something that you don't know, especially once employees are part of that mix. So, know how many people do you deal with every day? Even if it's just yourself, keep a tally. How many interactions did I have today? Of
Yeah.
those, keep a tally is like, all right, how many of those interactions went really well? How many of those kind of flopped on their face? So that way you can
Mm,
have an idea of, okay, if I'm having two, three, four escalations a week, something's weird happening. Or, there something's off. Uh,
mm,
so really just having that foreknowledge is one of the best ways to prevent escalations. Uh,
yeah. Yeah. And uh, that's really interesting too because I know in some of the businesses that my wife and I started up, customers would say, "Well, can you do this? Can you do that?" Like, and we're like, "Oh, sure, why not? Sure, this will make us money. Yeah, we can try it. We've never done it before, but yeah, let's give it a go." And so, kind of, you're saying that having that knowledge of, okay, this is what we do. This is why we're passionate about it. This is why we do it, and starting there helps sort of set the tone for expectations for your customers so that there's no miscommunications or misunderstandings or they're not getting frustrated. Kind of have to start from knowing yourself first and knowing your customers to really build the groundwork for good customer service.
exactly. Exactly. And that's probably one of the fastest ways to escalate a customer too is either you say that you offer a service that it's not actually what they thought it was. Um, or you tell them that that's not something that you do, but you didn't tell them in the best way. Um, and that's actually a whole other topic that that would
We
do
could
a
spend a
couple
whole
webinars
hour
on.
on that, huh?
Yeah, that's its own conversation by itself. Um, so one of the biggest things to remember, like I said, customer escalations are going to be inevitable. Regardless of what causes them, there's a really simple way to take care of it that will, you may not end the day being buddy buddy with that customer, but you'll
Sure.
at least end the day respectfully. On both ends is
Mhm.
is the hope there. Um, and that method is one that we teach. It's called the blast method. Now, I will admit I can't take credit for this one. This was actually developed for the food service industry by a guy in the medical field who sold it to McDonald's. Is your
Oh,
head spin?
wow. Oh, okay.
Um,
Interesting.
but it's actually become industry standard across all sorts of businesses, from small mom and pop shops all the way to Fortune 500 companies. Um,
Yeah.
so,
This looks this looks great, Keith. And real quick,
yeah,
so you're going to walk us through this. One thing that you just said that I thought was worth recapping really quick before we move on to the blast kind of process is you talked about how the goal um isn't to maybe become buddy buddies. Like it'd be great if you can resolve a conversation and then you get to continue doing business with that customer. But sometimes that's not always the case. But a really good goal to often aim for is like, you know what? We can shake hands and leave on good terms. At least we're ending this business relationship with respect for each other. And sometimes that's the win to shoot for because I know some people are like, man, I gotta, what can I do to keep them as a customer? What can I do to, you know, keep working with them? And sometimes if you delve into, like we talked about earlier, if you realize, wait a minute, this is what I really want to focus on with my business, and these are their expectations and they're not meeting up, then it might be for the best to end that business relationship. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, just as some encouragement for everyone listening to this, sometimes the goal isn't to be buddy buddy or to continue the relationship. Sometimes it's just to end that relationship with mutual respect for each other. So, I heard you mention that, Keith, and I thought that was like really good. And I wanted to kind of highlight that. And then you have this blast process that you encourage people to use. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah,
absolutely.
love to hear kind of what this looks like. And it looks very methodical and effective for handling difficult conversations.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole point of Blast is to de-escalate and solve the issue. Now there's any number of different solutions. So bear in mind, there's generally no right answer, especially when you get to that solve section, where you're trying to figure out what you can do to fix the problem. But there are answers that work better than others. But the biggest two things with this method are those first two letters. B is for believe, listen, L is for listen. Um, because and I do another webinar. It's called Is the Customer Always Right? Um, the short answer is no, in case anyone's curious. But when it comes to a customer's impressions, when it comes to a customer's feelings, yes, the customer is always right in terms of
Hmm.
how they feel. Because the moment you start arguing with them on feelings, on emotions, on, how they're interpreting stuff, again, you've lost the battle. And this is actually something that I have to continually practice in my own life, because I say stuff and my wife takes it one way, I meant it the other, and it doesn't matter what I say. It's the same concept. When you're dealing with customers, it doesn't matter what you say. You are not going to change their impression. So the best thing that you can always do is listen to them, listen to the full complaint, and God, is that hard. Uh,
Hmm.
there's there's some techniques that I'll teach if I'm doing a full training on this, on how to actually listen without raising your blood pressure.
Hmm.
Because it's going to be very tempting to do that.
I
And
need to hear that one because that's hard for me. Like
oh yes,
like the emotional atmosphere is so high on both ends, and it's like you can like
exactly.
I can feel the tension rising into my neck and into my face. I'm just like,
Mhm.
and then it probably starts to seep out into my tone and everything. So yeah, that would be something worth delving into more in the future.
Absolutely. So I side story on that one. So I've trained, oh gosh, probably 8, 10 companies on this just in the last couple years. Out of all of those, part of the training that we do is a little bit of role playing, where I will stand, facing one of my trainees, one of the employees, and I will literally cuss them out to their face about whatever it is they offer. I have only ever had one person, and she is my shining example. Anytime I do a training on this, of someone who could actually like stop me in my tracks. Um, and I've been in these situations before. I have literally been called every name in the book. I've actually been called the Whore of Babylon before. Um, that was an interesting one. That's a story for another time.
It's
And
like, what is that supposed to mean? Like,
I
oh, okay.
exactly. So I was literally throwing everything at this lady, and she stood there, she took it, and she shut me down. She's the only
Uh,
person in, probably 400 people that I've trained who has actually shut me down on this. So, and it's literally because she just stood there and she listened.
mhm,
Um, she listened to what it was that I was pseudo complaining about, and then she actually took a couple phrases after as I was taking a breath to recap what I said, and then make some sort of statement that she understood me.
mm,
And if that can shut down a trained role player, um, that'll shut down the hardest of customers. So that's
wow.
where those two are the most important things to bear in mind, is believing them and listening to them. That's going to de-escalate probably 90% of your bad situations.
Mm,
I mean, and then everything else after that becomes fluff.
mm,
Is that everything else after that becomes more about repairing the relationship than actually, still trying to de-escalate everything. Uh,
wow. Yeah, that's super powerful, Keith, because I think all of us, we want to be understood, and we want others to just validate how we feel, even if we're wrong. And like you said, just validating how someone feels in that moment, that's like 90% of the problem. If you can do that, everything
exactly.
else is just small stuff, small little things that you can tweak on the in the
Exactly.
conversation. So, yeah, really insightful.
Exactly. And then that's really where that apologize/acknowledge thing comes in, is, there's an apology will go a long way. Um, and not apologizing for the situation, but for the impression that it left. Apologizing
Hmm.
for the situation, you run the risk of getting into some legal issues. I mean, like, think like, being in a car accident. You don't want to be the one admitting fault, because that opens up its own can of worms. But that just serves to further, kind of calm things down, smooth things over. And then when you get to the solve portion, they're more likely to listen to your solution. And at that point, you have that opening that you can get in there and actually educate them on what's going on. Because that second bullet point that I have right there, education usually solves the problem. There was actually a
Mm.
study done by Qualtrics. They're a big customer satisfaction survey company. Um, they did a study, and then the Wall Street Journal came back and verified it. 98% of customer escalations can be solved through education.
So that's really interesting. Now, when you say education, like what would that look like on a phone call or having a conversation with someone?
Absolutely. So I give you an example from my own past. I used to work for um, a healthcare bill company, and I one of the biggest things that I would end up dealing with was, people want to leave. It was a healthcare sharing ministry. People would want to leave because they got this explanation, or they got this bill from a provider that they couldn't understand.
Mm,
And to them, it looked like the ministry wasn't doing diddly squat, when in fact, we had actually shared like 90% of their bill. And it you had to get through those first three steps, believing, listening to them, and in those cases, it was usually acknowledging the situation. One of my favorite ways to acknowledge it was just like, I get it, trying to read through this thing. Man, there is a reason that there is a master's degree in medical coding. Uh,
mm,
that apologizing, that acknowledgement, that can also be where you inject some humor into it. But then the education portion would always come from walking through, okay, line by line, what does this bill look like? What actually happened here? When you're dealing with with a product, and say it's a situation where, the product wasn't doing something that they thought it was supposed to. I mean, how many times have you had to explain, well, actually, if you flip this over and toggle the switch just inside the battery compartment, there you go. I mean,
Mm,
it's not, sometimes it'll make people feel kind of foolish, so you have to be, a little careful about how you phrase things and that sort of thing.
sure.
But you solve the problem for them right then and there. I mean, especially like say you're dealing with a toy for one of your kids. You know, you show them how to fix the toy, you show them how to get that thing back up and running. You didn't only make your parent the customer's day, you made their kid's day too. So, you know,
Right.
with one stone. And very, very seldom does a problem require money to be thrown on that.
Hmm.
That's where that 98% comes from is, does a discount feel good, or does a refund make it look better? Sometimes yes, but that's a double-edged sword that we can get into that another time.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, and that's a good point, Keith, too. Like we might have to have another conversation on this part of it because sometimes you deal with those customers like their their whole target is they want a discount or something because that's going to make them feel like they won, like it's going to be a win for
they,
them, and
they
in some
got one on you
cases,
now. Yeah.
yeah, like it kind of feeds into their ego, for lack of a better word. So like their whole goal on the conversation is like to get that discount and stuff. So I'd be curious. We can have another conversation about that. Like how you deal with those customers and when it's not your fault or they don't deserve a discount or you didn't do anything wrong and stuff. But yeah, yeah. So kind of going back to the educational piece, like it's that's a powerful sense. And you're saying just kind of explaining things like, well,
Mhm.
if you do this, this is actually how it'll help it work. Or like you in the health insurance business, explaining, that you actually took care of 90% of the fees and kind of just taking some time to educate them on their policy in a easy to understand way so that they get, okay, this makes sense. This is what's covered. This is what's in my policy and stuff. So thank you for kind of clarifying the
Yeah.
educational piece of it.
Yeah. And it is, there is a lot that can also go into that, like, can you do, does the educational piece work, but should you still give some sort of discount moving forward or something like that? And that's something that I work with businesses with on all the time. There's, eight different answers to that one single question. Um, but then the biggest thing, and this is the one that a lot of people tend to forget, is, taking that time to thank them once it's all said and done. Um, because that thank you is going to go further than anybody ever knows.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples for that one, there's a, I think it was a Super Bowl commercial. I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. Um, a couple ladies in the grocery store. One walks up to the other, says, she's kind of a larger lady, and says, oh man, you must be so proud. When are you due? And the larger lady looks at her, and is like, I'm not pregnant. And the lady who started it just stops and says, thank you. And they become besties. It doesn't actually work like that, but that's the idea. Is that thank you is going to carry you through. That's what's going to close that down on that respectful note that we were talking about. Uh,
Hmm. And
and
that can be a really humbling, very difficult thing, at least for me, because, oftentimes someone is calling you in to chew you out about how bad your product or service was, and as entrepreneurs, that's our baby. We're emotionally attached to that. So it's like get wrapping our mind around the fact that we gotta thank them for chewing us out, and it's like what? But it's part of a bigger picture. It's part of a
exactly,
deeper goal that's going on here.
exactly. And one of the things, I know we were kind of talking about this before we started recording here. The blast applies across the board. So whether you're talking to him in person, whether you're talking to him over a chat, if you're talking to him on the phone, via email, whatever the case may be, blast applies across the board. One of the things that's probably the most important place to use blast is on Google reviews.
Hmm.
So, negative Google reviews, those are, well, I call them job security. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
but they're
Uh,
they're the bane of existence of a lot of people. Um,
yeah, because you're right. We did talk a little bit about that before recording. Walk us through that a little bit because Google, we Google reviews, we have a hate-love relationship with them because we want them, like you said, we got to be like it's going to help us be successful. But then you get someone that, you know, we think is a jerk and they're ranting about our business, sometimes calling out people by name or just kind of being degrading in that way. Like when your first instinct is to put them in their place and call them out in a reply comment. That's kind of the first thing that comes to our mind. What do you suggest doing? Like what's the best way for business owners and people to respond to negative reviews from customers on Google?
yeah, I mean, there really is only one way to respond to a negative review. Um, there's no beating around the bush for that one. Because first and foremost, when you are responding to a negative, to any Google review, always remember there's a single rule of thumb. You are not replying to that person. You are
Hmm.
they're gone. They're done. They've said their piece. They're in the wind.
Yeah.
You're responding to everybody who's going to be reading that review, deciding whether or not to come, patronize your company.
Hmm.
Um,
So good. Yeah.
and so when you are responding to a negative review, respond to positive reviews by all means. Thank you so much. We love the 5-star. It was a pleasure working with. Respond to those however you want. Um, but when you have a negative review, the only acceptable way to respond to those is by saying, we are so sorry this was your experience. And either we don't have any record of you as a customer. Please contact us at, and then, whoever your customer service person is. Or this is not the experience that, we want any of our customers to have. Please contact us at yada, yada, yada. Note the similarities between the two is that last line.
Hmm.
Please contact us. And so what that does is it shows your willingness to work with people. It shows your willingness to hear somebody out, but it gives you that insulation so that you're not basically shooting your mouth off. Uh,
Hmm.
Probably one of the best examples of this. I have a client that I've been working with for um, almost a year and a half now, and we one of the first things that we did was fix how they were responding to Google reviews. But just recently, they had some staffing changes, and one of the employees that the customers really liked had to leave.
Hmm.
And it was on very good terms. It was very amicable. Nobody left, in tears or anything like that. But this customer was absolutely pissed that this person was no longer there. Now that's a cost of turnover, and that's something that we address otherwise. But
Hmm.
the way that they they kind of lost their minds for a moment,
It's a nice
and
way of
they
putting it,
responded
huh?
directly. So
Yeah.
that's probably one of the only times that I have ever called a business owner and verbally slapped them across the face. Um, because we had come so far. They've been doing so well, and then they had this one response that just totally trashed the whole thing. So I
Yeah.
essentially reached through my cell phone and grabbed him by his shoulders, like, "What are you doing?" But
And that's a tough situation, Keith, because like in the example of, an employee, went and got on their job. It was a good transition, nothing bad happened, but this customer felt the need to leave a bad review and rant and stuff. It's like that's not even like doing anything wrong in your business. And as a
exactly,
business owner, that can feel very unfair and uncalled for, and it is
exactly,
because the customer doesn't know the context or anything like that. And there's a lot of businesses and organizations that sometimes, they go through that. There's an employee transition, it goes really good, but the customers don't know that, and they're making these judgments and assumptions.
Yep.
Um, and that can be hard. That to me, that would be the moment it would be difficult to say thank you for that comment,
Absolutely.
it'd be hard to do.
Absolutely. And generally what I do recommend in those situations is, it's that old grandma adage, if you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all.
Yeah.
In this case, I mean, they could not give details on why this person left. Um, it was just it was a situation like that. And
Hmm.
so they had a choice. They could have either just left it alone, or you can respond to those. It's like, we definitely miss them as well. Please bear in mind we still have, you know this and this, ready, this person, this person ready to serve you if you come in. If you have any other questions, please contact us at.
Yep. Like, end with the contact at. Like, you don't want to try to resolve
Exactly.
something in that comment. You want to get them on the phone or having an email
Exactly.
conversation with you.
Exactly. A negative Google response, regardless of what it's for, should be 2 sentences maximum.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's my rant about Google reviews. But
I appreciate that because that's yeah, it's one of those things where it's hit or miss with Google reviews, and we live by them, and we also get really frustrated by them. So it's just good to have just knowing how we can prepare ourselves for those negative reviews and knowing that they're inevitable. I think you mentioned that at one point too, is just that we're gonna have negative reviews. Like, you might have a winning streak of perfection where it's all 100% for a while, but inevitably, for whatever reason, no matter how well you're doing things, it's like the example you gave of the person where they left and the customer got mad. It's like you can do all the right things and inevitably you'll still get a negative review. So just knowing, giving yourself, like preparing yourself that, hey, this is going to happen probably, and then knowing, hey, this is how I can respond to them, and I don't have to try to resolve it in the comment. It's just a matter of trying to get them to contact us so we can walk them through this blast process and hopefully either resolve the issue for them or leave on respectable terms. So this is really good, Keith. When it comes to preparing for better customer service experiences, because this is sort of like how do you respond to a situation that's already happened, and you know you got to de-escalate the situation. Is there any advice you can give us on how to sort of prepare ahead of time to invest in our customers, into the customer service process so that we don't have as many difficult conversations?
yeah, I mean, there are so many different ways to measure customer interactions. If I spend, 5 days working in a call center, and you'll have at least three of them drilled into your head.
Hmm.
Because that's that, this call is being recorded for quality and training purposes. That's what they're doing. Is, they're going back, they're reviewing those calls, and they're grading you based on those metrics. That's something that I do with my clients all the time. Is, I teach a proprietary customer service method called serve. um, Partly because I wasn't feeling very original when I wanted to come up with it. um, but basically what I did was I took three different customer service methods: the 4 C's, the 4 P's, and the 4 R's. uh,
Hmm.
one yeah one of these things is not like the other anymore. uh, and I smashed them all into one. Because each one of the four letters are really geared towards a specific interaction style, a specific industry, whatever the case may be. Like the four C's, for example, that's one that you will find in, I would guess, probably two-thirds of the call centers in the US. Um,
So you kind of had this process, this framework that you were having to use in these call centers, but then you took
exactly.
this extensive list and sort of took the ingredients in that and put it into your own recipe to create sort of the serve model that anyone
Exactly.
can use, not just like in the call centers per se.
Exactly. I mean, this is applicable across the board.
Mm.
Uh, and because it really took all the it took all the bureaucracy. Yeah, I think that's the right word. Um, out of those methods, and it drills down onto the common sense aspects of them.
Mm.
So like the first part of serve is smile. You can hear a difference whether you're talking on the phone or talking in person if someone's smiling or not. That's one of the biggest things there, and that's going to set the tone for the whole interaction. Is
And it
that
is
that
so
first
easy for
impression?
me, Keith. Like for me personally, and I'm guessing some others relate. I think there's a smile on my face. And then I look in the mirror and it's like, oh, there's a big scowl on my face. So just because you think you're smiling or you have a cheerful look, you might want to look in the mirror, look on your phone,
Mhm.
because sometimes what we think we're portraying isn't actually what people are seeing from us.
Exactly, exactly, and that's one of the things too is like you can even hear it in your voice. For example, you say something with a straight face, "Hi, welcome in," versus you say something with a smile on your face, "Hi, welcome in." I
Hmm.
I added a
Yeah.
smile. That was it. Um, and so that you can always hear your own voice. If you can't, you probably shouldn't have come into that work that day because you're probably pretty congested. Um, unless it's right now with all the allergies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's what's gonna set the tone for the entire interaction. Is just that subtle body language. Um, and then the middle two that I have in here are engage and relate. Now it probably feels like those are kind of one and the same, but really the engage is how are you listening to them? Is it active listening? Are you making eye contact the whole time? Um, are did you paraphrase what they're coming in asking for? Just making sure that you know what it is that they need. And then the relate is how are you interacting with them? So, that's like where the small talk, that's where the conversation, kind of like you and I are having right now. That's the relate
Hmm.
aspect of it. Um, and one thing I will always throw out for people is please, if you're gonna use small talk, please keep it relevant. If there's a
Hmm.
if you have like a clear glass door that they just walked in, or there's windows all over the place, for the love of God, don't ask them how the weather is outside.
Which is
Just
like the
don't do
first
it.
question that we asked when we're trying to make small talk, right? Like, how about this weather?
Exactly. Um, but a lot of times though, keeping the small talk relevant to them, um, and asking, keeping the small talk in kind of an open-ended fashion is also going to get
Hmm.
you more information so that you can better tailor whatever it is that you offer to whatever it is that they're looking for. So there's a practical element to that as well. It's not just, trying to be friendly, trying to be all sociable and that sort of thing, which is really hard for us introverts. Um, it, it gives you that element of, okay, hmm, you just started talking about this, came in looking for this, but I think this might be a better fit for you. So,
Yeah.
it really does bring up that level of service so that, yeah, you're still taking care of them. You're still making a sale, but you're making a friend in the process too.
Yeah. And Keith, real quick, because I wanted to recap what you just said about because like I'm a big introvert and I've real like it doesn't mean that I hate people. It just means that it takes extra energy to be around other people for extended periods of time, and sometimes I'm a little bit more reserved. Um, it's interesting because a lot of the keys that you've talked about, like paraphrasing people's needs,
Mhm.
asking open-ended questions, practicing that deep listening that can actually be kind of hard for extroverts to do too, because what I know from like a lot of friends who are extroverts it's very natural for them to do all the talking. So
Mhm.
all they need is for their customer to make one comment about what they're looking for, and then it's like boom, like they do 90% of the talking. So this is actually really good for our extrovert friends to kind of slow down and learn to ask open-ended questions and focus on relevant talk to get the customer sharing their needs and for
Mhm.
them to practice listening as well.
Absolutely. A friend of mine is he's an auto broker for one of the major like national auto brokerage chains. Um, and he's been their top salesman for gosh, when did he get that first one? 20, I think for about 10 years running.
Wow.
10 years in a row, he's been their top salesman in the region. And it's because he does this so well.
Hmm.
He's actually a little bit of an introvert, very much like myself. Um, but he's figured out, how to keep those open-ended questions natural, and it comes through practice. It's not a skill you're born with or anything like that. It comes through practice. I often joke with people, it's like, yeah, I can, network with the best of them, and then I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna play on my PlayStation with my headphones on for the next hour and a half.
Yes, or for me, it's my books. I'm going to sit in
Yeah,
my library here and
exactly.
read.
Exactly, and he's very similar. He goes home and we were actually at a networking event one time together, and we were both joking. It's like, yeah, I'm kind of hoping that the kids are in bed when I get home. God bless our wives because they took care of it, but yeah, this has been a
Oh,
lot.
that's
But
funny.
at any rate, he's done that to the extent where now, yeah, he has been the best auto broker in the region for this national company for 10 years in a row. I mean, to
Yeah.
the extent that he actually runs his own consulting business now. He and I are we used to be in a networking group together, and we were what they call power connectors. Uh,
Mm,
because he would teach him the sales side. He's a sales coach, and then once he had people bringing in the customers, he would send them to me so that I could help him hold on to the customers. Uh,
yeah. Right.
it's he's probably my best example of that relate aspect though, because you'd never know that he's looking for every excuse to end the conversation, as most introverts are. But he also he never interrupts. He never jumps ahead of you like a lot of extroverts tend to. Um, he's found that sweet spot, and it's just through practice. And
Mm,
there are so many resources online for that. There's um, one of my favorite ones. There's a guy named Kevin Kniebel on LinkedIn, and he has so many resources on there of like questions to ask. Don't ask these normal questions. Ask these instead. It'll
mm,
still feel like you're connecting with the person, but it's on a much more personal level. Um, that's a really good one. There are um there's sales tactics for introverts. That's actually a course on LinkedIn Learning.
oh,
um
wow.
yeah, you can go through and take those. So that relate, it is one of the hardest parts in the serve method, but it's also one of the easiest ones to find additional resources for.
Mm,
um because then after that, those last two on there, that verify the solution and the extra mile, those then kind of like the last three letters of blast, those become the fluff on
hmm.
the cake.
Yeah.
Icing on the cake, to use the correct idiom.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand. Because, like, when someone feels like you can relate to them, and I know, like, for anyone who's familiar with like John Maxwell, he's written a lot of books
Yes,
on
very
leadership
good example.
and communication. And the key to the key to oftentimes having successful interactions, making successful deals
Mhm.
is building that rapport and that trust first. And you really can't do that unless people feel like you can relate to them, you understand them, you're acknowledging them. So yeah, I would say, yeah, that's such a great point, Keith. Like relating, engaging, that's all like 80% of the whole process, and then verifying the solution is like kind of the icing on the cake. It's a small portion of the serve process.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then once you verify everything, that always the last thing I ask people is like, okay, now what can you do to make this person's day? And
Hmm.
that's that extra mile something. Um, and like I said, there is always something that you can do. You see them coming in military fatigues. You thank them for their service, or if your business offers a military discount, put it on there and don't say a word. Just
Hmm.
just add it on. You
Hmm.
don't need to ask for their ID. You don't need to ask for, you don't need to make a big deal about putting it on there. Just put it on, and they get to walk out of there. And if they
Yeah.
ask, oh yeah, that's right there. They'll see that kind of proactive t approach. Um, and that's one of my favorite examples. I have another client, in their waiting room, they have, a coffee maker. There's a like they have a Keurig, and I always tell them, it's like, proactively offer the person a coffee. There you go.
Yes.
Or, I mean,
That's
this particular client is in the veterinary industry. And so, if they're coming in with a sick animal, okay, while they're getting their medical history, come out from around the desk, get them a cup of coffee while the vet tech is working on them, and hand them the coffee. Just
yeah, that's so
it,
valuable, Keith.
it's simple things. So, so,
And
so.
and for introverts like me, like, because okay, there's like we go to a great chiropractor place, and they have, like you said, a full-on coffee bar, but it's kind of out of the way, and I always feel conspicuous, like going, kind of behind the counter to make myself coffee. Like if someone were like, "Can I get you a cup of coffee or something?" I might be like, "Oh, sure, that'd be great. Thank you so much." So just creating some kind of breaking the ice,
Yeah.
offering them that, being
What?
proactive about it. It's interesting because I've even little things like just complimenting people's clothes or their hair, like,
Yep.
oh, those are really cool highlights. And just that's all I say, or I like that jacket. It's
Hmm.
amazing how that just brightens someone's day. They're like, oh, yeah, I got this at the store and blah, blah, blah. So there's always something you can do. Like you said, that no matter how small it might seem, there's always some small action that you can do to go the extra mile.
Although I will just throw out there, and this is just coming from a dad of six. If they come in with a lot of kids, please don't say that. Oh my gosh, you have your hands full. Don't say that. That- Rant over. That's a
That's
really
good
fast way to
advice.
escalate someone.
That's good advice because with someone that does not have any kids, that would probably be something I would say. So I'll remember that. Well, Keith, I know you've given us so much valuable information. I know you have so much more in your slides, and we're kind of, we're ending nearing the end of our time together. But I just wanted to say I appreciate everything that you've shared. Um, is there is there any other kind of ending thoughts that you wanted to give as far as, going deeper into investing in your customer service process to make it better? Anything that comes to mind?
You know what? One case study that I've done in the past um, came out to, for every dollar that you invest in customer satisfaction, in training your employees in customer service. For every dollar that you invest in that, it's a $6 return.
Mm,
Because
wow.
what good customer service does is it builds your referral base. And so that ends up
Yeah.
becoming the people who, they tag you in the Facebook groups. They're the ones who are, oh, hey, you need your brakes worked on. Oh gosh, I know this guy. He's down off Circle. It's a little bit of a drive, but he is so worth it.
Mm,
Anything like that. That's that's probably the biggest thing. Is businesses are so obsessed with investing in their marketing, investing in SEO, investing in AI right now. Good
mm,
things
mm.
to do.
Sure.
Don't misunderstand. Um,
But keep
Very
the
good
the
thing.
right thing first. Like, don't let
Exactly.
all those other things cloud what's most important. And that's so true, Keith. Like, in all of the it's so ironic because my background's marketing, but when my wife and I had our businesses in the past, I was just looking back and realizing like 90% of our customers came from referrals. A very small portion of them said, "Oh, I found you on Google."
Yep.
So, and oftentimes we don't think about investing in our customer service as a good ROI. We're focused on sales and advertising, and that's where a lot of our dollars go. But and I think Seth Godin wrote a book called, I can't remember the title, but it was on marketing. And he makes this whole case, kind of like what you said. If you invest in your customers, in the customer experience, that's the most powerful form of marketing that you can do because they are going to refer you. Um, re and the referral part's a powerful thing. The retention part's also a powerful thing because if you can retain your customers, and guess what? You don't have to spend as much advertising trying to get new customers because you're keeping your current customers. So yeah, great advice. Thank you. Thank you again for your wealth of wisdom and expertise. I wanted to mention to everyone watching this video as well that Keith has several different webinars that he hosts targeting these specific topics. He goes into depth, not just investing in your customer service, but also investing in your team. And, he just brings a lot of expertise to the table when it comes to this. So, I love, Keith, that you have this QR code on your screen. So, anyone watching this, if you haven't already, get
This
your
is my
phone.
contact information.
Yes, yes. So, he makes it really easy. You can just scan that QR code and reach out to him. And, definitely connect in some of those webinars. And knowing Keith, like do I probably shouldn't say this until I verify with you, Keith, but do you offer like a free consultation in the beginning for folks to like, okay, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so generally what I'll do is, if you reach out to me, if you want even just take a look at what I do, I come in with a free, it's called a rave report. And it is a net promoter estimate based off of your Google reviews. So hopefully most people have heard of Net Promoter Score. If you haven't, it's a measure of how referable you are. Um, the higher the number, the more referable your business is. I give you a free estimate on that just based on what I see on Google. And to date, that review is accurate to within about 8 points.
Wow.
Um, so it's really, really easy to see where your business stands. And then I'll just put in a really quick plug. You mentioned the webinars. Next Wednesday, May 28th, whatever the last Wednesday in May is.
Yeah,
Um,
last Wednesday, man, that's all you have to remember.
we're doing the full version. So those slides that I showed are from one of my webinars. It's a blast to serve light. It's the simplified version of my full customer service training. Totally free webinar. In fact, all of my webinars are totally free. They're always on the last Wednesday of May, or on the last Wednesday of the month
Sure. Yeah.
at 1 o'clock Mountain Time.
Okay, perfect. So this one's coming up in May, but moving forward, because I know a lot of folks will be watching this video probably after May, but just keep in mind, it's the last Wednesday of the month, 1 o'clock Mountain Time. You
Mhm.
can jump on those and reach out to Keith to get on those webinars. So
You
awesome.
can take a look at my website to see what the next topic is going to be because it rotates. Um,
Awesome.
and that is servebc.com/resources.
Perfect. Sounds great. Well, Keith, thank you so much for giving your time and adding value
Pleasure.
to business owners who are wanting to invest in their customer service. We really appreciate you and look forward to maybe doing some more videos like this, talking about how to have conversations with customers and yeah, investing in that part of a person's business. So appreciate you being
Pleasure.
on with us today.
All right. Thank you, Isaac. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.